I'm smiling, guys, because I'm back in studio. And first of all, in my arrival, they were airing the room for me to make sure when I arrive, it's not too warm. And there's this construction guy who is doing some constructions. And I hear the owner whispering and saying to them, hey, you need to be quiet. Like I hear them whispering. And I love that because the studio owner is so nice to me. And I just feel the love from them and the empathy from them towards my direction this morning. So just wanted to express that before we jump into this video, that sometimes, when we are doing our things and we are working through our life to come to a studio, to be able to come here repeatedly every single week and to build relationships with the people who work here and to feel respected and honored in return is just blowing my mind. So I'm so grateful for the treatment that I'm getting here, truly. Welcome back to another video, or if you happen to be listening on the Omni Channel podcast, welcome back to the podcast. Today, I want to talk about a topic that I have talked before, but it was only a short podcast episode called When People Don't Make Sense, Detecting, Understanding, Blueprint Mismatches. And I remember having to record that episode on my phone 7 a.m. in the morning in my living room on the couch, because that was the moment when it came through me raw, and I wanted to honor that and post it at that time. But I wanted to come here to not only sit down to expand on that concept, but also to make sure you guys have a video version of it, of the expanded concept, because I do believe that this is foundational if you are leading people, if you want to lead people, or you want to deal with humans in a way that is the utmost respect possible. Okay, so here's something I have noticed and I have learned over my 32 years of existence in this earth, is that humans are perfectly sensical creatures. They all make sense. Everyone makes sense, always. Okay, so I don't believe that there is a single human who does not make sense. Even if they have a personality disorder, through their lens of personality disorder, their behavior makes sense. So their actions and their behavior always make sense. That's the baseline of understanding humans, that we all always make sense. And that's the foundational understanding of the human-to-human lineage that I'm building right now. And when we think about the baseline of everyone always makes sense, it also preassumes that when people don't make sense to us, it's because we are looking at a wrong blueprint. AKA, we all have our own blueprint of seeing the world, of operating the world, like our own point of reference, our own perception of the world. And whenever our perception, and we are actively using this perception to perceive the world, right? Through my lens, I perceive something. Through my lens, I think that if I was in their shoes, I would have done X, right? So that makes me think that through my lens of understanding humans, I know what they would do, how they would act, how I would act. I know through my lens of understanding humans, most people, what they do is they start pathologizing and judging, right? If I see someone who is acting in a way that is not in alignment in how I would have acted in their situation, most people, we are like, okay, this is crazy. This makes no sense, right? And that's the easiest route to take, is to judge, is to jump into conclusions, is to be like, yeah, he's just dumb. Like whatever critical label comes up to us, it's what we're going to kind of blurt out. And with that, most people, they just move on with their life, like whatever. Right? And so what I have learned, especially as someone who is actively leading leaders in business context, advising leaders, and actively interpersonally be present with my friends' lives and my own life. What I have noticed is that whenever someone's behavior doesn't make sense to me, my first instinct then becomes to understand why. And then my next instinct then, okay, I'm looking at the wrong blueprint. I need to step into their blueprint, see through their reality, and then suddenly it will all make sense. And every time I do that, I am able to oh, wow, that makes perfect sense now. And I think it does take effort to be like that, but especially if you are someone who is constantly dealing with humans, that this is your job, we can't avoid them, no matter what. Having to kind of have this reflex of, okay, this makes no sense, why? Immediately makes you want to understand the other person and what blueprint they are operating from. And what ends up happening is that once you understand them, you develop compassion for them. And with that compassion, you are no longer judging, but you're able to steward or lead the relationship and keep it intact, whether it's a business relationship, business context, or just find the compassion to relate to them and meet them where they are. Does that make sense? Now, we talked about the fact that it actually takes much more effort to wanting to step into someone's blueprint and see them and see the world through their lens. It takes effort, and that's why most people don't do it. But there's something else that is important for you to understand. When people are refusing to step into someone else's POV, it's very simply because they don't have a solid enough center from which they can step into someone's reality to observe what's going on for them, to understand what's going on for them. And I have realized this and I've seen this many times. When we don't have a strong center, we don't have a strong understanding of what we like, what we don't like, who we are not, what are values, what are important to us, and not just a personal scale. Because remember, if you don't know this, identity does not just come from who I am. Identity, actually, most of identity comes external things, like where I grew up, what's my family lineage, what's happening, which country I am from, which religion, which traditions I'm following, right? In a grander scale of human and race, right? All of those actually adding to identity. So once I'm unclear on my own identity, whether it's in personal or in a greater scheme of what identity is composed of, it's very hard for me to step into your lens if I don't even know who I am. And what I've seen is that there are people who seek identity outside of themselves and they spend a lot of money on identity coaches or just having people telling them that's who you are. And I think it's an important and interesting quest to understand who you are, because from that point, you can really walk away from that POV to step into someone else's. So only when we have our center is when we can venture out to look at what's going on for other people. Okay? So we talked about the fact that it's important for you to have that center. And then from that center, you can step into someone else's reality to see what's going on for them. And I want to add here, since we are talking about identity here, that what I have found is many people are looking actively to get that defined for them from externally. But I also recognize that it's very hard to find accurate mirroring of people who can genuinely see and perceive you accurately. It's very, very difficult and it's very hard because most people, they project, right? I always urge people to have discernment on whether or not is this an accurate perception of you. And what I have developed over the years, whenever people mirror something about me back to me, is I immediately go this is true, this is not true. Because I already developed a strong enough center that is strong enough to know what is true for me and strong enough to know what is projection, but at the same time is fluid enough to constantly grow and change. And that's also important when it comes to identity. Even if some people, they have defined identities, they have rigid identities at the same time. So in order for you to step into someone else's POV, you not only have to know who you are, you also have to have a certain fluidity about who you are, which makes you bend enough and be fluid enough to then eagerly step into someone else's reality to understand what their blueprint Okay, so I know people, they are so solid about who they are that solidity becomes like a confinement chamber. It's a rigid identity from which they cannot venture. Just to recap this part, first, a very important ingredient into stepping into someone else's blueprint so you can understand them and develop compassion so you can meet them where they are is wanting to take the effort and understanding that when there is a blip in the system and you don't understand someone's behavior because they don't make sense to you, understand that this is not a universal law, that your perception is not universal. Therefore, this is a signal for you to investigate in what is the mismatch in the way you see it and the way they see it. And so you can go and investigate that and understand them better. Second, have your own identity and have your own center, but make sure that it's fluid enough that you can walk away from it, and also fluid enough that it's not strict in terms of that's who I am, this is right, that's wrong, right? Because when we have defined identity, we sometimes become way too rigid about that. And this is right, that's wrong, right? So then we fall back into judgment. And then the third step would be is to just go ahead and study the people to understand them. There comes a point when you have to recognize that you are in face of someone who does not want to do that. They don't want to put in the effort, like whatever their reasons are. And like I said, it's their own blueprint. The outcome is the same. They don't want to understand me. Therefore, it doesn't matter what I say. I just need to stop talking because at this point, like they don't care to understand me, right? And recognizing that and just pulling back and saving your energy is going to be amazing. Sometimes when I step into your blueprint to examine, to understand you because your behavior somehow didn't make sense to me, I can also recognize that, oh, I know why you did what you did, but at the same time, I don't personally agree with that, right? So I can still conclude in my investigation that it still would not fly with me. I can still have compassion for you, but I can still discern and be like, okay, with me, that wouldn't work because that's just who I am. But to you, I understand and it makes sense, okay? And there's something I want to bring here as well. And this is in terms of cycles, right? Because if we are on the realms of wanting to understand people, here is something else I have learned, right? So we have the first layer of understanding, which is the blueprint mismatch, right? And we just learned how to intuitively step in to someone else's blueprint and what are the prerequisites of you being able to do that effortlessly. Well, it's not effortless, but what are the prerequisites of you doing that if that's what you want to do? But there's something else I want to add here, and that is all about cycles and needs. So when it comes to people, here is something I have realized. The more I look at someone's behavior, and this a personal behavior or a business behavior, but the more I look at someone's behavior, the more I observe the behavior range in which they act, the more it starts to look like a pattern to me. And I don't want to name anyone here, but I have clients that they go through phases of, exploring, launching, pulling back. Like there are cycles in which we all are operate in business. And of course, personally, there are cycles in which we are expanding a little bit more, we are contracting, we are cocooning, we are learning. We are different people, right? And we have different cycles. I happen to observe this in the business because I'm experiencing that and seeing and observing that with the clients I work with, but I also have entrepreneur friends who are also operating in their own cycles. And I want to give you this very specific example. So I have an entrepreneur friend, and I want to give you this example here, like without naming anyone, that it took me a while to understand this person's cycles because once we were becoming friends, so to say, there was such a degree of engagement that started to kind of build up, only then to go radio silence for 3 months, only then to come back to re-engagement, only then to go back to silence. And so what has happened to me, I was like, first time it happened, I was so like, what the hell is happening? Because there was such an abrupt change in the behavior of this person. But once I recognized and I went to investigate, I understood that this is a part of a cycle. So this person can go into go, launch mood, and this person can go into reflection, withdrawing, planning, thinking, right? And this person can go into like having fun and being open, right? So once we understand those behavior patterns and we see that, okay, they have this cycle in which they withdraw, they have this cycle in which they launch and they go, they have this cycle in which they reflect, like to understand that in an individual level and to zoom out enough to see it, like the whole thing, is going to help you so much not to take someone's behavior personally. Because the more you see, the more you zoom out, the more you be like, okay, this is part of a cycle for now. So you don't take things personally, right? You don't take it upon yourself. And the same goes to business as well. And I would like to add in terms of buying as well. And I want to bring in the concept of needs, okay? So Marshall B. Rosenberg, the creator of nonviolent communication, his foundational work is the following. We all have needs and desires at all times, right? So this means that when we have certain needs, like all humans have needs, and we want to get those needs met. Either we are aware of what those needs are and we can ask for that to be met in a way that's not pushing anyone, but in a way that's invitational or in a way that people would give us from their heart. But generally, we all have unmet needs that we want to get met. And what I have realized even in business context and buyers' behavior is sometimes they can have a need to buy and they can have a need to just research and they can have a need to just be left alone. And once you understand that individually we go through the cycles of whatever personal cycles everyone has, they all have their own cycles. It's unless you're close to someone enough to observe their behavior and to understand what cycle they are in, what you're going to realize that in different cycles they have different needs. Okay, so for example, I recognize this and it happens to me all the time. Whenever I want someone to come to my podcast, they're not in a season of taking speaking opportunities, right? And they might be in a season in which they will. And in that moment, there will be convergence of needs, okay? And that is when they will be met. So when you have a need to have someone on your show, I'm going to give you this example so it makes sense to you. But they have a need to kind of focus on their work or they pull back, they're launching a new book. Your needs are not converging, right? And in that moment, they're likely going to say no to you. But if you find out again later, which has happened to me, I got rejected first and then second time I got accepted, it was because they were in a season of speaking and taking engagements, right? And when I was in a season of taking guests again, and they were in a season of speaking, that we are converging our needs and then we can both meet them. Does that make sense? So when you're looking at a buyer behavior, it could be that right now they don't have a need to buy, right? They don't have a desire and need to buy because they are focusing on something else, but you have a need to sell. You want to sell. And so when you want to sell, but they don't want to buy, what you're going to get is opposing needs. Opposing needs, you're not going to get them met. But if you have a desire to sell and then they have a desire to buy, you guys are meeting each other's needs and it's going to be a transaction there. Does that make sense? So recognizing what is happening in you in terms of business and recognizing that people are moving through cycles in which they are, whatever personal is to them, is also going to help you not take rejections personally, or even to see that there will be a time when this might be relevant for them to be buying from you, right? Because right now they're not in the season, they're not in their cycle of buying. They are in a cycle of research. So recognizing that it's all about, are they ready for me? Am I ready for them? And if I'm ready and they're ready, we're good. If I'm ready, they're not ready, this won't happen now, at least for now. Until they are ready for you and you're ready for them, perfect. So this helps you to kind of understand that, okay, so we have different blueprints that they're operating. So if their behavior does not make sense, it's because they have different blueprints and we have different, can we step into theirs? But also understand that people have different cycles in which they operate, in which they have different needs, right? that's why the way we show up for the people, even if they don't buy right now, even if they are not ready for us, is ultimately going to enhance our chances of actually getting our needs met. The mismatch starts and the friction starts when we are trying to force people on our own timelines, right? I have this need because I need to make money, but you don't have a need to buy, and I'm trying to force you into my timeline, then it's not a win-win situation, because I might get you, but because I was pushy or coercing you or whatever not clean way I got you to come and become a buyer, I may have got my needs met, but you may have been recognizing that this is not for you actually, and you might gonna drop off the program, or you might want a refund, or you might think and regret your decision. Does that make sense? So there has to be converging needs. There has to be converging cycles. There has to be awareness of that being the case for you to operate in a way that a leader naturally understands that this is the reality. I hope this was helpful for you guys. I know this introduces a lot of concepts that are easier said than done, but what I want you to take away from this video is to seek to understand people. Stop taking things personally. Everyone is doing things for their reasons. And if you take things personally and you think it's personal to you, then you're forgetting to step into their reality, which can be different from yours. And can you let that difference to be for now? And to recognize that it's all about meeting on the same need level for actually business transaction to happen is also very important. But even on a smaller scale, like even on an interpersonal scale, a connection can happen when you both have a need for connecting. And when people come at their needs, and even though we are not in that cycle, it's okay for them because they come with such spacious invitational energy to just be like, you know what, not now, but whenever that changes, I'll let you know. Does that make sense? So in that way, we did put ourselves in their map in the future if this makes sense for them, without ruining everything and trying to push them into our timeline. So becoming spacious and invitational is definitely going to bring that whenever their needs are matching with yours, you are more likely to actually get them met. Does that make sense? So thank you so much for watching and listening to this one. I know this is a long one. Empathy as we know it will come in April. I will be sharing more details about it soon. And the way I'm going to deliver this entire program is through individual stories in which empathy as we know it showed up in leadership. And today's story, this is empathy as we know it through and through, because knowing that you are not on the same blueprint and wanting to understand there is actually empathy at its finest. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this one, and I'll see you guys very soon.